HOA. Karen tried to force me into her lake HOA. She said it was mandatory. She said everyone had to follow her rules, even when I told her the lake wasn't hers. But here's the thing she didn't know. The lake she was guarding so proudly, the one she claimed as community property, it already belonged to someone else, someone she never expected. Because when she called the cops on me that day, she had no idea that I owned the entire lake. Hey everyone, welcome back to HOA Secrets Uncovered, where we expose the wildest HOA stories hiding behind perfect lawns and smiling neighbors. My name's Mark. I live in a quiet lakeside neighborhood on the edge of town. I moved here for peace, privacy, and the sound of water in the mornings. But what I didn't know was that my new neighbor, Karen, had built an entire empire of control around this lake. And when I refused to play by her rules, things got ugly real fast. So, here's how it all began. I thought moving to the lake would bring quiet mornings and small, simple days. I wanted a place where I could think and fix things and be alone sometimes. The cabin was older than the houses down the road. It had a crooked porch and a big oak tree and a view of water that never stopped moving. I fell in love with the sound of that water the first night I slept there. The first time I saw Karen, she was clipping something from her lawn with a small, sharp face that matched the neatness of her yard. She wore a cardigan that looked like it had never known mud. She smiled at me like a woman who smiles to make sure everyone knows she is smiling. Her smile landed on me and then slid away with her eyes like a shadow. She said, "Welcome to the neighborhood," and I said, "Thank you." She said the word neighborhood like it owned the place already. She asked if I had joined the lake HOA yet, and I said I had not heard of such a thing. She opened a clipboard like it was a key and began reciting rules like rain falling on tin, no loud music after dusk, no guest boats without a sticker, no fishing during certain hours, a long list of small orders that felt like a map to follow someone else's life. Her words pushed through the air like cold water under skin. I told her I had just moved in and I was still learning the lay of the land. She blinked once and then leaned on the fence like she owned the fence too. "You will want to join," she said, soft like a knife. "Everyone who cares about the lake joins," she added, as if care was a membership card. Her neighbors backed her up with quiet nods at the next meeting and polite smiles that felt like small prison bars. I watched them from my porch like a man watching a theater he did not want to be in. I did not say much at first because I wanted to see how the play moved. I wanted to know what the script expected from me. At night, I sat with a stack of moving boxes and the sound of frogs and thought about what she said. The moon was a white coin over the lake, and it seemed to ask me to keep my mouth closed and listen. I had moved away from a city where people told each other secrets in loud voices and where fights were quick and public. Here everything worked slow and soft and sharp in small pieces. Days passed and the clipboard became a rumor that walked from house to house. Neighbors began to speak in low tones about fees and tags and new proposals for the order of the weeds by the shore. Karen started handing out brochures and polite threats like invitations you could not refuse. She had a way of saying things that made you feel wrong for asking questions. She had a way of looking at the lake like it was a jewel in a box she locked each morning. One afternoon I found an old photo in a drawer behind a row of nails and a bottle top. The photo was of the lake from a time when men wore caps and boats were simple wooden things. On the back of the photo, someone had written in a hand that trembled less than mine now, "Cabin Lot 12 Owner," and a name that matched the deed in my documents. I slept on the small truth like a warm stone until morning. In the light, the truth became a plan that felt like a slow grin spreading across my face. I did not want to make a show of it the way Karen would have loved. I wanted the right kind of quiet revenge that felt like closing a door softly and hearing someone bang on it later. So I went to the county office where papers lived under the hum of fluorescent lights. The man behind the counter did not look up when I asked for the records for the lake and the cabin lot. He just stamped and shuffled, and then slid a bundle of old deeds and maps toward me, like a gift left on a table. The paper smelled like old rain and the ink had small cracks in it from sun and time. There it was in black ink, like a cold truth, Full water rights and ownership of the lake and surrounding land remain with the property owner of cabin lot 12. I looked at the lines twice, as if a second look might be a trick played by the eye, but the words were steady and true as a stone. I owned the lake in print and stamp and page and old inked lines that had survived storms and taxes and the slow-moving dreams of people who once planted trees there. Holding the paperwork felt like carrying a secret that was also a weapon and a key. I took a breath so deep it shook my shoulders, and then I breathed out like someone who had been holding their breath underwater for too long. The next HOA meeting was in the community hall that smelled of coffee and old varnish. Folding chairs made rows like little islands, and neighbors sat like citizens waiting for a small verdict. Karen stood at the podium with a stack of forms and a book that looked like rules had weight. She talked about membership and fees and keeping our lake safe for all, and her voice had the smoothness of a river that runs in a channel made by other hands. She made it sound like she gave the lake to the world, and world was her debt to the people who liked her smile. When the floor opened for questions, my hand rose as if someone else moved it for me. "Can you show the deed that gives the HOA ownership of the lake?" I asked in a voice that did not want to shake, but did. A soft murmur flowed like wind through dry grass, and people turned like they had been hit by a small stone in the water. Karen's smile slid away, and her color changed in a way that made me think of old fruit on a dish. She said, "We have implied ownership," and the room inhaled the words like they were a soft blanket that might cover every loose thing. Implied ownership sounded like a story told to children who had not yet learned the meaning of the word real. I watched Karen's hands find the edge of the podium like a person who wants to hold on to something solid. She glanced around the room and saw only faces and expectant eyes, and I felt the air crack small and fine like ice. When I left that night, the moon leaned over the water like a watcher, and the lake answered like it always does, with soft movement and no sound that could be caught by words. I walked back to my cabin thinking about the way people try to own what they do not truly have the right to keep. What would you have done if you found out you already owned something everyone else thought belonged to them? Would you reveal it loud and shine it like a trophy, or keep it quiet and watch how the owner of the clipboard learns the truth slowly and painfully? The next morning the air felt different. Maybe it was lighter, or maybe it was just me. I walked down to the lake with my coffee still steaming in the cold air. The water was glass, perfect. Not a ripple in sight. It looked too calm for a place that was about to become a battlefield. I could still hear Karen's voice from last night echoing in my head. "We have implied ownership." That phrase had been rolling around in my mind like a marble in a tin can. Implied, not owned, not proved, just implied. I smiled, because I already had the papers that said otherwise. She didn't know it yet, but her little HOA kingdom was standing on my land, and her castle was about to sink straight into the lake she thought she ruled. By noon, I saw her again. She was marching up my driveway, clipboard clutched tight, her hair pulled back like a general heading to war. "Mark," she said, that fake cheer still dripping from her voice, "I need your signature on these documents to finalize your HOA membership." I looked at her papers. Bold letters said mandatory agreement, fees, maintenance dues, penalties, even rules about how long you could sit by the lake. I took a slow sip of coffee, then said quietly, "I'm not joining your HOA, Karen." Her lips pressed into a tight line. She gave a little laugh that didn't sound human anymore. "Oh, honey, everyone joins. It's not optional." "Then you'll have a problem," I said, "because I'm not everyone." The wind picked up just then, and the lake behind me shimmered like it understood the moment, like it was on my side. Her smile twitched. "You'll regret this," she said. "People who don't follow the rules never last long around here." I let her walk away. Didn't say a word, because soon I wouldn't need to. That night I sat at my desk under the flickering yellow lamp. The old deed lay open beside me, and I drafted a few letters of my own, to the HOA, to the county, to the neighbors. Just polite little notes informing them that Cabin Lot 12 and the lake surrounding it were private property, not HOA property, not community-owned private. I didn't say it to start a war, but I knew Karen would take it as one. The following morning I found a bright orange notice on my door. Apparently I had committed unauthorized posting of signs on HOA territory. I laughed out loud. The irony hit harder than caffeine. The signs she was talking about were the small wooden ones I'd put up at the shoreline. They said 3 simple words. She couldn't stand it. That small truth written in black paint was enough to crack her empire. By evening she had called an emergency meeting, and once again the folding chairs filled the hall. Karen stood at the front, her voice sharper this time. She accused me of causing confusion, dividing the community, and endangering the HOA's legal structure. I waited until she was done, then quietly placed a copy of the original deed on the table. Her words died in mid-sentence. People leaned forward, their faces changed. Whispers spread faster than wind across the lake. One of the board members reached for the papers. He read the lines, then read them again. Finally, he looked up and said, "Karen, this says he owns the entire lake." The room fell silent. Her face turned a shade I'd never seen before, a mix of red and disbelief. "That can't be true," she snapped. "It's community property." The man shook his head slowly. "No, it's private. Always has been." She tried to laugh it off, tried to wave it away like it was a rumor. But no one was smiling anymore. That night she drove past my cabin twice, slow, headlights sweeping across the porch like a searchlight, and when she thought I wasn't watching, she stopped near the mailbox. I could see her silhouette, stiff, still, like someone planning something they couldn't undo. The next morning I woke up to find tire marks in the dirt road and my new signs torn down. I didn't need to guess who did it. I replaced them that same afternoon, this time with sturdier posts, metal instead of wood, and I added a camera hidden near the door. I didn't want revenge. Not yet. I just wanted proof. 2 nights later, the footage caught her, in full view, sneaking down with a flashlight, yanking out the signs again. I didn't report her. Not then. I wanted her to think she'd won, just for a little longer, because what she didn't know was that every time she tried to tear something down, I was building something stronger in silence. By now the whole neighborhood knew about the ownership papers. Some neighbors stopped waving, some whispered when I walked by, but others came quietly, thanking me, saying they were tired of her rules, tired of paying for what wasn't hers. It was strange how one truth could change an entire place. Karen started sending letters again, formal ones, accusing me of violating community harmony and threatening legal action. So I sent her something too, a certified copy of the lake deed, with a sticky note attached that said, "Careful what waters you stir." After that, she stopped the letters, but I could see her watching from across the lake, through binoculars sometimes, like she was waiting for a reason to strike again. The silence didn't feel peaceful anymore. It felt charged, like the still air before a storm. I'd learned something about people like her. They don't stop when they lose. They wait. They plot. They build new traps under polite smiles. And I knew, somewhere in that perfect little house of hers, Karen was planning her next move. The morning after she tore down my signs, the lake looked different again. It wasn't the water, it was the silence, the kind of silence that hides something, the kind of silence that waits. I stood on the porch with my coffee, watching the fog drift over the lake like a thin curtain. Everything looked soft and peaceful on the surface, but I could feel it. Deep down, something ugly was moving underneath. That's when I heard the sound of a car door slam. Loud, sharp. I turned and saw her, Karen, walking toward me again. No clipboard this time, just a folded letter in her hand and a look that could cut glass. She didn't even say good morning. She just held out the letter. "You'll want to read this," she said. I unfolded it slowly. It was printed on HOA letterhead, all formal and neat. I almost laughed. She was accusing me of restricting access to my own lake. I looked at her and said quietly, "Karen, you really don't give up, do you?" Her jaw tightened. "You can't just claim public property, Mark. You'll regret this. Our attorney is already reviewing it." She turned and walked away before I could say another word, her heels clicking on the gravel like small hammers on stone. I didn't go after her because I knew what I had, and I knew what was coming. That afternoon I drove into town again, to the county clerk's office, this time with one goal: to make sure the lake's ownership wasn't just old paper. I wanted it verified, sealed, official. The clerk looked up the records, scrolled for a while, and then said the words I was waiting for. "Yep, it's clear. This property and lake haven't changed hands in over 60 years. All yours, Mr. Davis." I nodded, thanked him, and walked out with certified copies in my bag. The whole drive home I couldn't stop smiling. Karen thought she was building pressure, but she didn't realize the trap she was standing in. The next day she called a neighborhood meeting again. This one wasn't in the community hall, it was in her own backyard. I could hear the noise from across the lake. Her voice raised, sharp, trying to stir people up. I decided to take a quiet walk down the edge of the lake, just to see how things were going. By the time I got close, I could hear her words clearly through the hedge. "He's trying to take control of the lake from all of us. He's posting signs. He's blocking access. If we don't stop him, we'll lose everything we built together." A few neighbors clapped. Most just looked uncomfortable. Someone asked, "But doesn't he have the deed?" Karen's voice cracked. "He says he does. That doesn't make it true." That's when I stepped out from behind the hedge. Every head turned. Karen froze like someone caught midlie. I held up a manila folder. "This?" I said. "This isn't something I say I have. It's something I do have." The folder opened, the papers unfolded. Seals, signatures, dates older than any of us. A man in the back squinted. "Wait. This means you really own the lake?" I nodded once. "Every inch of it." Karen's smile broke. For real this time. No fake calm. No power. Just panic trying to hide behind politeness. She stammered something about lawyers, about zoning, about fairness, but nobody was listening anymore. I left the papers with the board member who looked the most honest, told him to read them himself. Then I walked away, not saying a word. That night, the neighborhood was quiet again. No cars driving by, no porch lights flickering late, but around midnight I heard something out back, a soft splash, a faint beam of light moving along the shoreline. I stepped onto the porch. The flashlight beam froze, then disappeared. A figure ran off into the trees. I followed the muddy footprints in the morning. They led straight back to Karen's yard, so I installed new motion lights by the dock, and a second camera, hidden this time. The next evening, the camera caught her again. She was standing near the water, throwing rocks, at the signs, at the reflection of my porch lights, at the calm, silent lake she could no longer claim. Her anger had turned into something else, something heavier, something personal. I watched the footage twice, and I realized it wasn't just about control anymore. She hated me for taking away the one thing she believed gave her power. The lake had become her identity, and now it was mine. A few days later, I got a letter in the mail. This one wasn't from the HOA. It was from a law firm. Karen was actually suing me, claiming emotional distress and unlawful ownership interference. It sounded ridiculous, but I knew how this kind of story could twist if you weren't careful, so I called my own lawyer, an older man named Jenkins who'd lived in town longer than anyone. He read the documents and then laughed. "Don't worry," he said. "She's got nothing. I'll handle it." Weeks passed. Then one afternoon, a white envelope arrived. Inside was a short letter from Jenkins, case dismissed, ownership verified, HOA claim invalid, just like that. It was over, or at least it should have been. because the next night I woke up to the smell of smoke. It wasn't thick, just faint, but it was there. And it was coming from down by the dock. I ran outside, the lights flicked on, and for a split second I saw someone running away through the trees. The fire was small. I put it out before it spread, but the message was clear. This wasn't about the lake anymore. This was war. I stood there by the water, wet and breathless, watching the reflection of my porch lights dance across the black surface, and I wondered, if Karen was willing to burn something she claimed to love so much, what would she be willing to destroy next? That night changed everything. The smell of smoke still lingered in the air the next morning. The water looked calm again. But I knew better now. Calm was just a disguise. I sat on the porch with my coffee growing cold, the burned wood near the dock still smoking faintly. A dark reminder of what she'd done, or tried to do. I replayed the image in my head, that shadow running through the trees, the crunch of gravel, the glint of her flashlight disappearing into the dark. It had to be her, Karen. No one else cared enough. No one else hated me that much. I didn't call the cops this. At night, something told me it would only make things worse. I wanted to see what she'd do next, how far she'd go before she realized she couldn't win. By noon, I got my answer. I was sitting by the lake, sanding down the edge of my old rowboat. When I saw her again, she was standing across the water, on the opposite bank, hands on her hips, phone in her hand, and then she started taking pictures. I could almost hear the captions she was already writing in her head. Dangerous neighbor destroys community property. She's not done, I muttered under my breath. She's setting the next trap. That evening, an envelope showed up in my mailbox. No stamp, no name, just a plain white envelope with something thick inside. I opened it carefully. Inside were printed photos of the burned dock, my dock, and a single note, proof of environmental damage caused by unauthorized lake owner. No signature, but her perfume still clung to the paper. She was building a case, not in court, but in the court of public opinion. By morning, the neighborhood group chat was buzzing. I wasn't in it, of course, but one of my neighbors, an older guy named Paul, showed me the screenshots. Karen had posted everything, photos, claims, warnings. She's saying you're a danger to the lake, Paul said quietly. She told everyone you're dumping chemicals and killing the fish. I laughed, but it wasn't funny. I hadn't even used a fishing pole in weeks. Do people believe her? I asked. Paul hesitated. Some do. That hit harder than I expected. It wasn't about ownership anymore. It was about reputation, about turning me into the villain of her story, so I decided to change the story myself. That afternoon, I set up a small table by the lakeside, invited a few neighbors over, told them the truth, showed them the deed, showed them the official county seal, and then I said something I hadn't planned on. Anyone who wants to fish or swim here. You can free, no fees, no tags, just respect the water. I grabbed the boat hook and pulled it in. Inside was a pile of shredded papers, soaked, but still readable. And right there, on the top piece, I saw her name, Karen Whitmore. It was a notice from the HOA, a complaint report, but not about me. It was from me, filed under my name, my signature, forged. The accusation? Karen Whitmore is engaging in harassment, vandalism, and threatening behavior. It was dated 3 days ago. My stomach dropped. She was setting me up again. This time as if I had started the legal war. If she sent that version to the HOA first, I'd look like the one who falsified it. I went straight inside, turned on my laptop, and checked my email. There it was. A message from the HOA board. We've received your formal complaint, but due to its tone and inappropriate language, we're escalating this matter to legal review. Tone and inappropriate language? I hadn't written a single word of it. I called them immediately. No one answered. That's when I heard the knock. 3 short, sharp knocks. I opened the door, and there she was, smiling, calm. "Good morning, neighbor," she said sweetly. "Rough night?" I didn't answer. She tilted her head, pretending concern. "I just wanted to say, I think we've both taken this too far. Maybe we should find peace?" Her words sounded almost human. Almost. Then she added, "I've already spoken to the board. They understand now. It's all being handled." Handled. That word sent a chill through me. "What did you do, Karen?" I asked. She smiled wider. "Oh, you'll find out soon enough." Then she turned and walked away, humming. A few hours later, my phone buzzed. Unknown number. I answered. "Mr. Reynolds, this is Deputy Hall from the County Sheriff's Office. We've received a report about you." My pulse froze. "About me? What kind of report?" There was a pause. Harassment, property damage, and posses. Threats made toward an HOA board member. My hands went cold. "She's lying," I said. "I can prove it. I have photos, timestamps." "We'll need to come by and collect a statement," he interrupted. "Please be available this afternoon." The line went dead. I sat there, stunned. The woman had officially turned this into a full-blown war. By the time the deputies arrived, Karen was waiting outside her house, arms crossed, tears in her eyes, acting like the perfect victim. She waved at the car as it pulled up. Her performance was flawless. I told my story, calmly, clearly, showed them the burned dock, the letters, the fake complaint. One of the officers frowned. "She's accusing you of trying to scare her off the property," he said. "She even claims you damaged her security camera." "My what?" I laughed in disbelief. "She doesn't even have a security camera." The officer exchanged a glance with his partner. "She does now. Installed last week. She sent us footage." "Footage of what?" I asked. They looked at me carefully. "Footage of you standing outside her house last night." I felt my mouth go dry. That was impossible. I hadn't gone anywhere near her property. But then I realized, the angle, the distance, she could have easily staged it. She could have filmed anyone in the dark and said it was me. The officers took my statement and left. Karen watched from her porch the whole time, smiling again. That same awful smile. That night, I couldn't take it anymore. I had to know how she was doing it. I grabbed my flashlight and crossed through the trees toward her backyard. If she had cameras, I wanted to see them for myself. The air was damp and heavy, filled with the smell of wet soil. Crickets chirped, frogs croaked near the lake. Every step I took felt like it echoed. Then I saw it, a small red light blinking near her fence, a motion sensor. She wasn't lying. It was about the cameras. But there was something else, too. Behind her shed, half buried in the mud, was a small box, an electrical unit with wires running into the ground toward the lake. I crouched down and touched it. Warm. I followed the wires. They disappeared beneath the dirt, running toward my dock. It hit me then. She wasn't just spying on me. She was sabotaging my property again. A faint humming came from the lake, like a generator running underwater. What the hell had she installed? I turned around and froze. Karen was standing right behind me. No flashlight, no sound. Just her pale face illuminated by the moonlight. "I knew you'd come snooping," she whispered. Her voice was calm. Too calm. "What is this?" I demanded. "What are you doing to my lake?" She stepped closer. Her eyes glinted. "Just making sure nature takes its course." "What does that mean?" She leaned in, almost close enough to whisper it into my ear. "You'll see. Once the water turns black." Then she turned and walked back toward her house, her silhouette vanishing into the fog. I stood there in silence, staring at the humming box. I didn't touch it again. I just walked back to my house slowly, my hands trembling. Whatever she'd done, it wasn't over. And the way she'd said those words, like a promise, made my stomach twist. The next morning, I woke up to the sound of sirens. 2 police cars, an ambulance, and neighbors gathering near the lake. Someone had collapsed by the shore. An older woman who'd been walking her dog. The officers shouted for people to stay back. "Possible contamination!" And when I looked at the water, the lake that had always reflected the sky so beautifully, it was darker now, almost black. My heart stopped. Karen was standing at her window across the road, watching me, smiling again. The lake was black, like spilled ink spreading across a page that once told a peaceful story. People gathered by the shore whispering. Cops taped the area off. But my eyes didn't move from one thing. Her window, Karen S., stood there behind the glass, still, smiling, that same cold, empty smile that didn't belong to a normal person. I didn't say a word to anyone. I just walked back inside, my heart pounding like a drum, because somehow, deep down, I knew, whatever had happened to that lake, she'd done it. By noon, the police were knocking on doors, collecting samples, asking questions. When they reached mine, the officer, Deputy Hall again, looked tired, like he'd been through this too many times. "Mr. Reynolds," he sighed, "did you see anything suspicious last night?" I stared past him toward Karen's house. Her curtains moved slightly, just enough to let me know she was listening. "No," I said quietly, "but I think you should check her backyard." He raised an eyebrow. "Karen's?" I nodded. He jotted something in his notepad and said they'd look into it, but I could already tell by his tone they wouldn't. After they left, I sat at my desk, staring at the lake through the blinds. Fish floated belly up near the surface. Birds that used to land by the shore were gone, and that faint humming sound was louder now. I turned on my laptop, opened my old blueprints for the lake, the drainage lines, the electrical pumps I'd installed years ago when I built it. That's when I realized something chilling. There was no system that matched what I saw near her shed. Those wires weren't part of my design. Whatever she connected, it was something new. And it ran straight to the center of the lake. I needed proof, real proof, so that night, when the neighborhood went quiet again, I grabbed my flashlight and put on a pair of old boots. The air smelled sour now, like metal and rot mixed together. I walked along the dock. The boards creaked under my feet. And there, right near the end, I saw bubbles rising to the surface, steaming bubbles. I crouched down and dipped the flashlight beam into the water. Something as glowing underneath pale blue light, flickering like a heartbeat. "What the hell?" I whispered. Then I heard the crunch of gravel behind me. I turned, and there she was again, Karen, in her robe, barefoot. "Beautiful night, isn't it?" she said softly. Her voice floated across the water like smoke. I didn't answer. She stepped closer. The light from my flashlight caught her eyes, and for a second they looked strange, reflective, like an animal's in the dark. "What did you put in the lake, Karen?" She smiled faintly. "Nothing you'd understand. Try me." She laughed, a quiet, broken sound. You think you own the lake just because your name is on some papers? You think it's yours because you dug a hole and filled it with water? I clenched my jaw. It is mine. Her smile widened. Then why does it listen to me now? Before I could speak, she turned and walked away, her reflection rippling across the black water like a ghost fading. The next morning, the humming stopped. Completely. I went outside, half expecting the lake to look normal again. But it didn't. The water had receded, just a little, like it was breathing, and in the center I saw something I hadn't seen before. Metal. A small dome-shaped structure barely visible under the surface. It wasn't part of anything I'd built. I grabbed my binoculars. It had writing on it, but not English. Strange symbols, carved like something ancient. And then, a ripple moved outward from it, slowly, like something shifting underneath. That night I couldn't shake the image. I sat staring at the lake again until I noticed something new. Karen's lights were on, but her windows were open, and that humming had returned, except this time. It wasn't coming from the lake, it was coming from her house, a low, rhythmic vibration that made the walls in my home buzz faintly. I stepped outside. Her entire backyard glowed faint blue, same as the light under the water. I took out my phone and started recording. That's when I saw movement behind her curtains, not her silhouette. Something taller, thinner, moving like liquid shadow. I froze. A second later, her front door opened, and she stepped out, calm, composed. "Oh, good," she said, seeing me across the street. "You're awake. You should watch this." "Watch what?" I asked, my voice shaking. She pointed toward the lake, and right as I turned my eyes back to it, the water shifted, like something massive moved just below the surface. Waves rolled to the edge and splashed against the dock. The blue light pulsed brighter, and in that glow, for a split second, I saw shapes. Not fish, not reflections, shapes that looked like hands, pressing upward from beneath the surface. I stumbled back, dropping my phone. Karen just smiled. "Don't fight it," she whispered. "It's always been here, waiting for someone to wake it up." I couldn't breathe. The air smelled electric, like rain before a storm. Then, as quickly as it started, the light vanished. The lake went still again. Dark, silent. Karen turned and walked back inside. Like nothing had happened, I stayed frozen there until the first hint of dawn painted the sky. When I finally walked back inside, my phone buzzed. A message from an unknown number. "You shouldn't have built it there." No name, no sender, just that. And when I looked out the window again, the lake wasn't black anymore. It was red. The lake was red. Blood red. Like the earth itself was bleeding through the water, I stood there at dawn, staring at it through my window. The reflection of the rising sun made it shimmer, but this wasn't light. This was something else, something alive. My hands trembled as I grabbed my jacket and stepped outside. The air was thick, heavy. Every breath tasted like rust. Neighbors were already gathered near the fence lines. No one spoke. They just stared, like they knew something terrible had happened, but could. Didn't find the words for it. Then I saw her, Karen, standing near the shore, barefoot again, smiling that same slow, knowing smile. I walked toward her, my boots sinking slightly into the muddy grass. "What did you do this time, Karen?" She didn't look at me. Her eyes stayed on the lake, calm, focused. "Do you hear it?" she asked softly. "Hear what?" "The lake, calling back." I listened, and for a moment, I thought she'd finally lost her mind. But then, I heard it too, a deep, low sound, like the heartbeat of something ancient under the surface, slow and steady, and getting louder. "What is that?" I whispered. She finally turned to me, her face pale, her eyes darker than I'd ever seen them. "It's older than this town," she said. "Older than both of us." My chest tightened. "What did you wake up, Karen?" She smiled faintly. "Not what. Who?" And then she just walked away, leaving muddy footprints behind her. By noon, county hazmat trucks lined the road. They sealed off the area, took samples, warned everyone not to touch the water. I tried to tell them what I saw: the glowing light, the humming, the movement under the surface. They looked at me like I was crazy, but when one of the workers lowered a probe into the water, it short-circuited instantly. The supervisor swore under his breath and pulled it out. The metal was corroded, eaten away. In seconds, he turned to his team and ordered everyone back from the water line. That night, I sat alone on my porch. The sirens were gone, the trucks too. Just silence. And the lake. It was perfectly still again. Too still. Around midnight, I saw lights moving on Karen's property. Not flashlights, lanterns, dozens of them. Figures moving in a slow, deliberate circle around her dock. I crouched behind my fence, watching. They were chanting. I couldn't make out the words, but the rhythm was hypnotic, like waves against the shore. And then I saw Karen, standing in the center, holding something in her hands. A glass jar, inside it. A faint blue glow. She knelt down and placed it in the water. The moment it touched the surface, the entire lake pulsed with light. The red faded to black again, but this time the light didn't stop. It kept spreading outward, until the whole surface shimmered like liquid glass. The chanting stopped. Karen looked up, straight at me. Even from across the distance, I could see her lips move. "It's awake." The next morning, the lake was gone. I don't mean drained. I mean gone. The entire basin was dry, mud cracked and smoking under the sun, fish bones scattered like dust. And at the center, that metal dome I'd seen before, now completely exposed, I walked toward it, ignoring the warning tape and the silence around me. The closer I got, the more I felt the heat radiating from the ground. It wasn't natural. The dome was covered in markings. Not human writing, more like carvings or symbols that pulsed faintly with color. A small hatch on the side was open, and inside, I saw something that didn't belong to this world. It wasn't a machine. It wasn't alive either. It looked like a heart made of glass and metal, still beating. I reached out. The moment my fingers brushed the edge, a sharp pulse went through the air, like static, and I heard her voice behind me. "Don't touch it." I turned. Karen stood a few feet away, her hair wild, her face pale. "It chose this place," she whispered, "long before you thought you owned it." "What is it?" I demanded. She stepped closer. "Something we were never meant to wake up." Before I could reply, the ground trembled, dust fell from the trees, and that heartbeat sound returned, louder than ever. Karen backed away, her eyes wide. "It's too late now," she said. "You can't own the lake anymore. It owns you." I stumbled backward as the dome cracked open. Steam poured out, and for a brief, horrifying moment, I saw what was inside. Something moving, something breathing. I ran. By the time I looked back, the entire lakebed was glowing blue again, and in the distance, through the heat and the fog, I swear I saw figures climbing out of the ground. Not people, not animals, something else entirely. The next morning, half the neighborhood was gone. Doors open, cars in driveways, but no one inside. Karen's house was empty too, completely bare, like she'd never lived there at all. And the lake? It was full again, perfectly clear, peaceful, like nothing ever happened. But sometimes, when the moonlight hits the water just right, you can see them, shapes under the surface, moving slowly, waiting, and every night I still hear it, that low hum, that heartbeat, that reminder that maybe Karen wasn't crazy after all.